She does not play for the Indiana Fever yet, but she is already rocking the merch like she just signed a max deal in a secret ceremony. She sees the sold-out arenas, the viral highlights, the Caitlin Clark jersey sales climbing like Bitcoin in a boom cycle. And in the modern political economy of professional sports, there are only two types of players who attach themselves to generational superstars. The first archetype is the strategic veteran, the enforcer. The adult in the room who understands championships are built on sacrifice. This player recognizes opportunity the way a seasoned senator recognizes a swing vote and adjusts their strategy accordingly. They are willing to surrender personal statistics in exchange for something far more powerful, a ring and a legacy. Then there is the second archetype, the clout chaser, the political opportunist of the hardwood. This player sees exploding ratings, endorsement gold rushes, and a superstar spotlight and thinks, "I deserve a slice of that pie." They do not come to protect the ecosystem, they come to harvest it. Right now, the Indiana Fever sit at the epicenter of the global sports conversation like a campaign headquarters on election night. Caitlin Clark has created an economic tidal wave so massive it has every free agent recalculating their GPS coordinates. Bench players are suddenly refreshing Zillow listings in Indianapolis like it is Silicon Valley during a tech hiring spree. The Fever jersey has become the hottest accessory in the league, and everyone wants to be seen wearing it. But while social media campaigns rage, the front office has a much colder calculation to make. Because roster construction is not charity, it is high-stakes political strategy with sneakers. Indiana desperately needs defensive reinforcements, especially after a rookie season where Clark absorbed contact like a crash test dummy. She was bumped, targeted, and tested by veterans who were not thrilled about the new sheriff in town. So, when a 6'3" defensive forward starts publicly modeling Fever merchandise, people pay attention. This is not an accidental wardrobe malfunction, this is a strategic signal flare. The gravitational pull of the Caitlin Clark economy has become almost impossible to resist. On paper, the fit looks perfect, like drafting the final puzzle piece of a championship blueprint. At 6'3" and 185, she brings rim protection, switchability, and the kind of screams that feel like minor car collisions. Every dynasty in basketball history has required that physical counterweight to its offensive genius. Michael Jordan had Oakley and Rodman absorbing punishment so he could soar. Stephen Curry had Draymond Green orchestrating chaos and setting screens that defenders still complain about at alumni dinners. Offensive brilliance always travels best with defensive muscle-riding shotgun. And Caitlin Clark, the league's most watched player, could absolutely use a bodyguard in high tops. Someone willing to commit the hard foul and send a respectful but unmistakable message. But here is where this analysis shifts from basketball talk to psychological warfare. Physical tools are only 10% of the evaluation. The remaining 90% is motive. Why does this player want to come to Indianapolis right now? Is she arriving to set screens, grab boards, and protect the franchise cornerstone? Or is she arriving to expand her brand portfolio under the brightest spotlight in women's sports? Because locker rooms are ecosystems, and ecosystems collapse when predators miscalculate their role. The Fever front office cannot afford to be dazzled by height and wingspan alone. They must conduct a psychological background check that would impress a national security agency. Does this player understand that this is Caitlin Clark's universe? Does she accept that the offense flows through one gravitational force? Or does she secretly envision herself running the show on national television? We have already seen cautionary tales in this league when ego attempts to override structure. When a historically secondary option tries to seize alpha status, the geometry of the offense collapses. Spacing shrinks, tempo slows, and suddenly a Ferrari offense starts driving like a minivan in rush hour traffic. That is the nightmare scenario Indiana must avoid with surgical precision. Because the Caitlin Clark system is not just entertaining, it is economically explosive. It thrives on pace, space, ball movement, and clearly defined hierarchy. Introduce the wrong ego, and you are not just disrupting chemistry, you are sabotaging revenue streams. The right addition, however, could elevate Indiana from exciting to inevitable. A disciplined enforcer who understands her role could be the difference between playoff appearance and championship parade. That is why this decision is less about social media optics and more about long-term strategic alignment. And hovering above all of it is a much larger power struggle that makes this roster debate look like a warm-up act. Because while players pose in fever gear and flirt with the spotlight, the league itself is standing on a negotiating fault line. The collective bargaining agreement looms over this entire situation like a thunderstorm over a 4th of July barbecue. The Players Association is demanding unprecedented revenue sharing, guaranteed housing, and dramatically expanded salary structures. They are arguing that ratings, spikes, and sold-out arenas represent leverage in its purest form. From their perspective, the Caitlin Clark boom proves the product has arrived, and the players deserve a historic slice. But leverage in sports economics is not built on vibes, it is built on spreadsheets. Ownership groups look at operating margins, long-term sustainability, and television contracts, not just social media engagement. And in this particular power structure, the ultimate authority does not sit in Indianapolis. It sits in the NBA headquarters office of Commissioner Adam Silver. Silver is not a motivational speaker. He is a corporate strategist overseeing a multi-billion-dollar global empire. When he speaks about negotiations reaching the 11th hour, executives hear calm patience, not panic. He has not declared a drop-dead deadline, and that absence is louder than any fiery press conference. In corporate diplomacy, silence often signals confidence. The WNBA does not operate in isolation. It is structurally intertwined with NBA infrastructure. The NBA owns half the league, negotiates major media deals, and provides operational blueprints. That reality shapes every bargaining conversation behind closed doors. Players may believe a single explosive season has shifted the balance of power. Ownership may believe structural economics still define the boundaries. And somewhere in the middle, Adam Silver calculates risk with the calm demeanor of a chess grandmaster. If the union pushes too aggressively, the threat of a lockout becomes more than theoretical. Billionaire owners can withstand financial droughts longer than individual players can. That asymmetry of endurance defines the real leverage equation. Silver does not need to intervene dramatically if patience accomplishes the same objective. From a strategic standpoint, allowing negotiations to stretch can pressure one side to recalibrate expectations. That is the cold arithmetic of labor relations in professional sports. Meanwhile, free agents campaigning to join Indiana may not fully grasp the macroeconomic stakes. They are chasing roster spots in a system that depends on a stable league framework. If negotiations fracture the season, no amount of Instagram engagement will replace lost paychecks. The irony is almost cinematic. Players seek to attach themselves to the Caitlin Clark phenomenon for financial security. Simultaneously, collective bargaining brinkmanship risks destabilizing the very ecosystem generating that opportunity. It is like arguing over the division of treasure while the ship itself drifts toward a reef. The Fever front office must evaluate talent while also reading the political temperature. Signing the wrong personality during economic uncertainty compounds risk. A fragile locker room plus a fragile labor environment equals strategic chaos. That is why psychological alignment matters more than highlight reels. The enforcer archetype is valuable only if she embraces hierarchy. A disciplined defender amplifies Clark's strengths without demanding equal billing. A clout chaser, however, views the roster as a marketing platform. That mentality shifts focus from collective mission to personal narrative. When personal narrative overrides system integrity, offensive flow deteriorates. The ball sticks, spacing shrinks, and transition opportunities vanish. What was once a symphony becomes a series of disconnected solos. For a team built around pace and perimeter gravity, that shift is catastrophic. The Fever cannot afford ideological confusion in the locker room. Every championship blueprint requires clarity of roles. The superstar sets the orbit. The supporting cast reinforces it. Deviations from that structure must be corrected immediately. In this environment, Indiana's leadership faces decisions that blend basketball logic with political foresight. Because roster moves today may collide directly with boardroom outcomes tomorrow. Now step back and look at the chessboard, because this is no longer just about a 6'3" forward in a Fever hoodie. This is about power, hierarchy, and whether Indiana protects its golden goose or lets someone else grab the microphone. The Caitlin Clark ecosystem is not a pickup run at the YMCA. It is a finely tuned economic engine. Every possession, every logo 3, every transition assist feeds a machine that prints relevance and revenue. That machine runs on pace, confidence, and unquestioned offensive authority. You disrupt that hierarchy, and suddenly the engine starts coughing like it needs premium fuel. The enforcer archetype understands this instinctively. She does not need to lead the parade. She is content guarding the float. She sets bone-rattling screens, cleans the glass, and makes opponents think twice about cheap theatrics. She knows her box score may be modest, but her impact echoes in wins. That is, political discipline translated into basketball language. The clout chaser, on the other hand, studies the spotlight like a campaign strategist studies polling data. She sees primetime slots and imagines endorsement negotiations. She hears MVP chatter and thinks, why not me? That mindset is combustible in a system that depends on clarity. When a secondary option starts campaigning for alpha status, offensive geometry fractures, spacing becomes cramped, tempo becomes hesitant, and transition lanes disappear. The once electric attack slows into isolation possessions that feel like watching paint dry in overtime. Fans who tuned in for fireworks get procedural basketball instead. And in today's entertainment-driven sports economy, that is not just disappointing, it is expensive. Indiana cannot afford a personality experiment gone wrong. The front office must ask one ruthless question before any contract is offered. Does this player amplify Caitlin Clark, or does she compete with her gravitational pull? Because in superstar ecosystems, gravity is not negotiable. History offers plenty of reminders. When role players embrace structure, dynasties emerge. When role players attempt to rewrite hierarchy, locker rooms fracture. The Fever already witnessed how quickly tension can ripple through a young roster. Chemistry is fragile, especially under national scrutiny. Add in the social media microscope, and every missed pass becomes a conspiracy theory. That is why psychological alignment outweighs vertical leap or wingspan. Indiana needs a defender who views protecting Clark as a mission, not a stepping stone. Someone willing to absorb criticism quietly while delivering toughness loudly. A player who understands that championships are collaborative projects. This is not about suppressing ambition, it is about channeling it responsibly. There is room for individual growth inside a disciplined system. But there is no room for ego battles disguised as empowerment. The Sophie Cunningham model illustrates that balance perfectly. She capitalized on increased visibility without hijacking the offense. She defended physically, shot efficiently, and respected the pecking order. That is how supporting pieces become indispensable. The Fever must replicate that formula, not gamble on volatility. Because volatility paired with looming labor tension is a dangerous cocktail. Imagine introducing locker room instability while CBA negotiations simmer nationally. That is like juggling fireworks during a thunderstorm. Stability must be prioritized at every level. Ownership wants predictable growth, not dramatic headlines. Players want compensation reflective of impact, not symbolic gestures. And fans want competitive basketball that feels authentic. Balancing those interests requires strategic restraint from everyone involved. Now elevate the lens even higher, because this is not just about basketball rotations, it is about institutional leverage. The WNBA Players Association believes this is a defining moment to demand structural change. They see television ratings surge and assume the negotiating window has swung wide open. From their vantage point, momentum equals power, and power should translate into revenue percentages. But ownership views the same numbers through a far less emotional filter. They see operating costs, long-term obligations, and historical profit margins that remain razor-thin. In their calculus, sustainability outranks sentiment. And that is where Adam Silver's quiet posture becomes strategically significant. He has acknowledged urgency without issuing ultimatums. In high-level negotiations, restraint often signals confidence in underlying leverage. Silver oversees a global basketball enterprise with massive television contracts and expansion ambitions. The WNBA exists within that broader corporate framework. That structural reality shapes the ceiling of any revenue-sharing proposal. The union may demand unprecedented percentages of gross revenue. Ownership may argue those figures are mathematically untenable under current economics. If neither side adjusts, the threat of a lockout becomes more than rhetorical. And in that scenario, endurance becomes the decisive variable. Billionaire owners can withstand short-term losses in pursuit of long-term precedent. Individual players, however, rely on seasonal income streams. That asymmetry influences how long each side can hold firm. Silver does not need dramatic gestures if time itself favors ownership. By avoiding a drop-dead deadline, he preserves optionality. He signals awareness without committing to rescue operations. Some interpret that as indifference. Others recognize it as strategic patience. Meanwhile, aspiring Fever editions are campaigning for contracts that depend on a stable season. It is a paradox layered in irony. Players seek entry into the most profitable ecosystem in league history. Simultaneously, collective brinkmanship risks destabilizing that very ecosystem. It resembles debating seating arrangements while the foundation is under renovation. Indiana's front office must navigate both talent evaluation and political uncertainty. They cannot afford impulsive decisions driven by online narratives. The right defensive enforcer strengthens both competitive integrity and cultural stability. The wrong personality magnifies risk in an already tense climate. Caitlin Clark's universe thrives on clarity, pace, and defined roles. That clarity must extend beyond the court into boardrooms. Every roster move sends a message about priorities. Is the franchise committed to disciplined growth or reactive spectacle? Championship teams choose structure over noise, and sustainable leagues choose pragmatic compromise over symbolic standoffs. The enforcer archetype, properly aligned, reinforces hierarchy without demanding the throne. The clout chaser archetype challenges hierarchy and tests structural tolerance. One strengthens the ecosystem, the other strains it. That distinction may define Indiana's trajectory, and it may also influence how the broader league perceives balance of power. Because this moment is not merely about a roster spot. It is about whether momentum translates into sustainable strategy. It is about whether economic opportunity is protected or politicized. It is about understanding leverage in both sneakers and suits. The Fever must choose wisely, and the Union must negotiate wisely. Because in the end, championships and collective agreements are both won by those who understand power, timing, and alignment.